Tarik Oguzlu is a professor of international relations at Istanbul Aydin University. He joins us now live. Great to have you here. Now, this, we believe, is the last any form of election before the next 4 years. So how much is at stake?
I think there are many important points we have to underline in this particular context. The first point is that the last year we had the presidential elections and President Erdogan won once again. So over the 4 years ahead, so President Erdogan will remain in power. So there is not going to be any election that could potentially challenge his place. This is very much important, and we should also note that the Turkish people, the majority of Turkish people, had demonstrated its trust in himself, for example. But we should also take into fact that if Istanbul mayor becomes once again Ekrem İmamoğlu, which will mean that he will be the next presidential candidate who could potentially vie for presidential position in the upcoming 4 years. So this is a very much important development in this particular context. But if Murat Kurum wins the elections in Istanbul, which means that either President Erdogan himself or another guy who will pinpoint would have a higher degree of chance to be elected to presidency 4 years later.
Tarik, I just want to speak to you about the optics, because we've seen the Istanbul incumbent, Istanbul mayor, campaigning by himself, but the other one has been Murat Kurum. He's been campaigning with the president. Talk to us about the optics of that difference in campaign style.
That speaks to psychology of voters as well, voting behavior. Because many people might come to the conclusion that Ekrem İmamoğlu has been struggling with Kurum and the people, the government, the state itself, who is very much behind Mr. Kurum. So Mr. Kurum has not been fighting against Mr. İmamoğlu on a one-on-one basis, for example. So people might come to the conclusion that we should side with the weaker part in such a way to show much more sympathy with the guy. That's very much a psychological situation the people might come to adopt, actually.
Interesting point.
It is very much interesting because in the past we had seen such cases in the past. So when the people come to the conclusion that this guy needs support of the people and that guy won the elections in the past. So state getting very much involved in municipality elections might backfire on the part of the incumbent government, for example.
Tarik, you're a professor of international relations. As you walk through our newsroom, you see a lot of the screens there, international channels covering Turkey's local elections. What are the ramifications of this local election on international institutions, for example, and countries watching this, the US, the EU, and why would they be watching the local elections so closely?
But let me put this in a specific context. If you compare these municipality elections with the one we had last year, the degree of attention the international community had demonstrated was much higher. This time, the international community doesn't pay that degree of attention to elections here in Turkey because these elections will not have a real impact in terms of who will continue running the country. It's for sure. President Erdogan will remain in power. There is no question about that. But the fact that we are having fair and free elections, the fact that change of place is possible through ballot boxes, so this means that democracy or liberal democracy has been underway here in Turkey. But let me speculate on one particular issue. I think I peruse the international commentariat on Turkish elections. I come to the conclusion that the Westerners have developed an interest suggesting that if İmamoğlu remains in power, this guy would really have the power to challenge President Erdogan in the presidential elections to be held in 2028, for example. So they might come to the conclusion that this municipality elections would have a real impact on the way how Turkey might develop its relations with the Western international community, in particular in the following years. But if Kurum remains in power, if Kurum wins the elections, if President Erdogan secures a decisive victory in Istanbul, which means that Turkish people very much approve the kind of economic, social, domestic and international policies Erdogan government has been undertaking so far, which also suggests that Turkey's relations with the Western international community might witness to some tests or challenges in the years to come.